Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about soilless growing media. So when most people first get into LECA, I think there's a bit of a LECA craze where you put almost every plant you can into LECA to see if it works. Now this can work out well most of the time, but I think a lot of this typical kind of boring grow media like moss, wood pieces, bark, other LECA pieces, perlite. Once you get away from dirt and soil, then there's really a large amount of different types of media you can plant your plants into. So today I'm going to go through my favorite grow media that do not contain soil and or are for passive hydro and or LECA. So we're going to start with pure LECA and we're going to work our way to things that hold more water. The less water holding substrates you use, the more you'll have to water your plant. So this plant is in pure LECA and I have to water it once per day. For the average person that doesn't have pumps and automated systems, that is kind of a pain in the butt. My current favorite passive hydro and or LECA media to hand water is a 50% mix of LECA and perlite. Adding in that perlite to this mix allows me to hand water this plant twice a week. So I water them on Monday and I water them on Friday. About every 3 to 3.5 days, I water these types of plants. So adding in that perlite just extends my watering window just a little bit. And I am using drainage with this type of system. I really have been avoiding the passive LECA that kind of just sits in water because I'm finding there's a lot of root rot with that method. So like we talked about before in a previous video that I'll link, add in a bubbler if you're using passive LECA, and or you might just want to go to a hand watered method of using LECA and another substrate. Next up is a mix of perlite and chunky bark. So this was a customer's plant that had root rot and it wasn't doing great in pure LECA. So we swapped it out to just a mix of perlite, wood bark chips, and a granular 3-1-2 fertilizer. So instead of watering with a LECA nutrient, which we could also do, it can be a bit of a pain in the butt carrying for a lot of plants. We simply added a mix of perlite and chunky bark and then added in a little bit of that granular fertilizer, and this plant is taking off. Again, I water this plant maybe once a week. So now we're getting down the line into less frequent waterings that are kind of just easier to take care of. That's a big part of taking care of plants, is just ease of care. You don't want this to become a chore that's not fun. Taking care of plants is meant to be fun. So this is kind of another type of soilless media. It's technically not hydroponics, but we're kind of getting to the blurred lines of passive hydro and soilless growing. Okay, next up is my favorite media that we use that's the most common, and I've talked about it a lot, which is sphagnum moss and perlite mixed in with about a teaspoon of this 3-1-2 granular fertilizer. We also have this listed on our website, or I'm sure you can get it at your home and garden center, but it comes in a really big bag. You just need a pinch of this. This is my favorite because in a warm grow room like this, I'm watering this about once a week, sometimes twice a week on the hotter weeks, but it's just a very simple way to grow plants and avoid root rot. So this is just a really great way to be very sure that you're not experiencing root rot. I always judge these plants based on how much they weigh. This plant is very light right now, but this is kind of right where I want it. The top looks dry, but if you dig your finger down a little bit, you're gonna see some moisture. So this is my favorite type of soilless growing media, moss, perlite with a little bit of fertilizer. And if you don't want to use the granular fertilizer, just use your LECA AB nutrient and water like a mild solution onto this. In the peak growing season, you can feed with regular tap water and then go over to a LECA nutrient, go back to tap water and then a LECA nutrient and so on. Now finally over to a bit of a hybrid mixed soilless media. I've kind of thrown everything I have into this pot and it works great. It's a chunky Aroid mix that doesn't contain soil. I've got sphagnum moss in here, perlite, I've got wood bark, I think I have a little pumice in there, just why not? Some LECA little balls for extra drainage, and this plant again is very light in weight, but it has really great roots. You can see them sticking through the drainage holes there. So just remember that there's a big spectrum of different types of media between full LECA and traditional houseplant potting mix. So if that's over here on like the water once every 2 to 3 weeks, contains lots of water, high risk of root rot, there's a ton of different medias that you can choose through the middle. For instance, on this Aurea, we put it in pure LECA to begin with, but then she started really struggling. She just didn't like it for whatever reason. And then we put her in a mixture of LECA on the top and then LECA on the bottom, then a mix of moss and perlite through the middle. And you can kind of get creative with this once you start to understand what your plant's like and experiment, but you're really just trading out how much you have to water the plant with how much aeration is in that soil. The key part for growing healthy, fast growing plants is aerating the soil. That's why we grow in hydroponics. And there's things such as aeroponics, because you're adding a bunch of air into the root system, which is what creates big healthy plants, big roots. So this Aurea turned around. I inspected her roots yesterday. Maybe I can put up a photo of that. And she is a very healthy plant once we put her into a different, slightly different soilless mix. On a side note, I found the Aurea to be kind of challenging to grow compared to other Monsteras. She's very beautiful, but she doesn't contain that vigor that Albo has or even that Thai Constellation has. I found that out of all these plants, of all the variegated Monstera, my favorite is the Albo because she just is so resilient even relative to the Thai Constellation. We did talk about it a bit in the comment section, but Thai Constellation might have a situation with root rot. I'm not sure, I can't exactly be sure, but we've experienced it a couple times here with our Thai Constellation, and they might have something systemically happening from tissue culture down into any subsequent generations of that plant. So that's just something to look out for. But try out different types of media when you're growing your houseplants. It doesn't always have to be pure LECA, and I honestly don't think it should be houseplant soil, but sometimes pure LECA is the best choice. Thanks you guys so much for watching this week's video. If you did like the video and or learn something new, please click the like button down below. And if you want to come back every week for more houseplant tips and tricks, click subscribe and we'll see you next Saturday. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.